The sky above Dustvale Junction looked heavy enough to break, the color of bruised iron and sorrow. Wind whispered through the empty alleys of the frontier town, carrying the smell of wet dust, whiskey, and the faint tang of blood. The wooden auction platform in the square creaked under the shifting boots of men waiting, their laughter echoing sharp as knives. It was another day of trade, cattle, tools, and lives. The girl stood at the center of it, barefoot on rough boards, her toes streaked with dried blood and dirt. The hem of her dress clung to her knees, still damp, and her tangled brown hair stuck to her face where sweat and tears had long since dried. Her hands were tied loosely in front of her, enough to keep her from running, though there was nowhere to run in Dustvale. She swayed on her feet, the world blurring from the ache between her ribs and the hollow pain still bleeding through her body. The auctioneer, a man with a paunch belly and yellowed teeth, stepped forward and slapped his ledger with the flat of his hand. Next up, Lot 21. 20 years old, strong back, quiet tongue. Good for house or field work. His voice rang with forced cheer, though even he glanced uneasily at the girl's pale face. The crowd murmured, eyes flicking to the red stain spreading slow through her skirt. They knew what it meant. A few men looked away. Others smirked. The air was thick with judgment. She didn't lift her head until she heard it, the soft, muffled cry of an infant somewhere beyond the saloon doors. Her breath caught. Her baby. She tried to move, but her legs trembled and folded beneath her. The auctioneer barked a curse and jerked her upright by the arm, but she barely felt the pain. Her eyes searched the crowd for the sound, wild and desperate, as if she could tear the noise from the wind itself. "Please," she rasped, voice breaking. "Please, not my child. Please don't." The auctioneer shoved her back, waving his hat toward the men. "Don't mind her. Just had a little one. That's what makes her valuable. Knows how to breed, she does. $10 to start. 10. Do I hear 10? Laughter rippled through the crowd like flies over a carcass. "She can't even stand," someone snorted. "Ain't worth feedin'. 5, then," the auctioneer snapped. $5, and you've got yourself a worker." The girl's knees buckled again. Her body screamed for rest, for water, for mercy. She'd labored in the dark behind the stables just the night before, alone except for an old midwife who left her bleeding on the dirt once the baby was gone. The girl remembered the midwife's eyes, pity and fear mixed together, and the sound of coins exchanging hands. Now she was up here, and her baby was gone. The sun burned through the cloud cover in sharp slants, stinging her eyes. The men's voices blurred, their faces smearing together. She thought she saw the door swing open down the street, thought she saw a woman passing with something small in her arms. Her body moved before her mind did. She stumbled forward, falling to her knees at the edge of the platform. "Wait, please, my baby, don't take him." The crowd shifted, uneasy. A man in a brown coat muttered, "Lord above, she's bleedin' still." Another said, "Let her die and spare the trouble." The auctioneer sighed, muttering to himself, "Worthless if she drops dead." He turned to wave her off when a voice spoke from the back. "How much?" The sound sliced through the noise, low and steady. Heads turned. A tall figure stood beneath the shadow of the overhang, broad-shouldered, his long duster trailing dust behind him. His hat shaded most of his face, but what little light reached him showed a hard jaw, a scar near his mouth, and eyes dark enough to make men look away. The auctioneer blinked, stammering, "Mr. Graves, didn't think a man like you'd be interested in this one." "How much?" the man repeated. 5. The cowboy reached into his coat and tossed a leather pouch toward the stage. It hit the wood with a heavy thud, coins spilling out, catching the light. 20, he said. "End it." Silence swallowed the crowd. The auctioneer stared at the pouch as if afraid to touch it. $20. For her. She's sold. The hammer fell. The hollow crack rang across the square, echoing off the buildings like the end of a sermon. The cowboy climbed the steps slowly, each board creaking under his weight. The girl looked up, terrified. She'd seen that look before. Men who bought women weren't kind. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. He crouched in front of her. Up close, he smelled of rain, saddle oil, and tobacco, warm, earthy, alive. He didn't reach for her roughly. Instead, he shrugged off his long coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, covering the blood, the bruises, the shaking. Her fingers clutched the edge of the fabric as if it were a lifeline. "Can you stand?" he asked quietly. She swallowed hard, then nodded. Her body screamed in protest, but he slid an arm beneath her knees and lifted her before she could fall again. Gasps followed them as he stepped down from the stage. The girl's head fell against his chest, too weak to hold it up. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the dirt, washing the blood from the boards behind them. Someone in the crowd called out, "She ain't worth savin', Graves." "She's broken." He didn't stop. His boots hit the mud with slow, measured steps. "Then I'm fixin' to see what happens when you give someone a chance to heal," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear it. The girl stirred slightly, her fingers curling into his shirt as if she recognized the truth in that tone. Her lips moved, forming a name, maybe her baby's, maybe her own prayer, but the rain swallowed it. The town watched until the pair vanished into the silver mist rolling across the plains, leaving behind only a quiet platform, a handful of coins, and the fading echo of mercy that didn't belong in a place like Dustvale Junction. When the last of the stormlight faded, the auctioneer found his voice again, muttering to no one in particular, "Never thought I'd see the day a man paid $20 to save a lost soul." But out past the hills, where the prairie grass swayed under the cleansing rain, the cowboy held her closer, his coat wrapped tight around her trembling frame. Her heartbeat was faint but steady, and for the first time since that long, cruel night, she began to believe she might see another dawn. The morning came quiet and clean after the storm, the kind of calm that seemed to rinse the land itself. The horizon stretched white and gold, dotted with the faint silhouettes of grazing cattle and the crooked outline of a barn still slick with rain. Smoke curled softly from the chimney of the small ranch house tucked between the hills, and the air carried the scent of coffee, wet earth, and something like peace. Inside, the woman lay still on a narrow bed near the window, wrapped in an old quilt that smelled faintly of cedar. Sunlight crept slowly across her face, tracing over bruises that had begun to fade and lips no longer blue. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she wasn't cold. Her body, weak and scarred, rested easy against the mattress, and her breathing was steady. The sound of soft coos from across the room stirred her from sleep. Her eyes opened, slow and unsure, like someone afraid the world might still be cruel when she looked at it. Then she saw the cradle. It was handmade, smooth pine polished by calloused hands, rocking gently from the wind drifting through the half-open window. And inside it, wrapped in a soft blanket, was her baby, tiny, pink, alive. Her throat tightened. She pushed herself up, pain searing through her body, but she didn't care. She stumbled a few steps to the cradle and fell to her knees beside it, tears spilling before she could stop them. She reached out, brushing trembling fingers over the baby's cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin. He stirred, made a small sound that was halfway between a sigh and a hiccup. For a long moment she couldn't speak. She could only stare, as if afraid that if she blinked, he'd vanish again like a dream. "How?" she whispered, her voice cracking. The door creaked open behind her. She turned sharply, startled. Graves stood there, filling the doorway like a shadow made solid. He had cleaned up since the night of the auction, hat off, shirt sleeves rolled up to the elbow, hair still damp from washing. His eyes, though, hadn't changed. They were quiet, watchful, carrying something deeper than pity. He stepped inside, carrying a cup of water. "You should drink," he said. "You've been out 2 days." She stared at him, the words catching in her chest. My baby, he's yours," Graves said simply. He set the cup down on the small table beside her. "Went back that night. The woman who took him didn't argue much once she saw my pistol." Her hand covered her mouth. You went back." He gave a small nod, his gaze flicking toward the window. "Ain't right what they did. Nobody should wake up without their child." Tears came harder now, falling silent down her cheeks. "Why would you?" He cut her off with a small shake of his head. "Don't need reasons for doin' what's right." She stared at him, trying to read something more in his face, anger, pride, anything. But there was only calm. A man who had seen enough ugliness to know mercy when it was needed. She turned back to the cradle, running her fingers over the baby's soft hair. "His name's Eli," she whispered. "I didn't even get to tell anyone that." Graves nodded slowly. "Eli," he repeated, like it was something sacred. He moved toward the stove, pouring coffee into a tin cup, the silence between them gentle instead of sharp. When he turned back, she was watching him closely. "Why did you really buy me?" she asked softly. "You didn't have to." He took a sip before answering. "Maybe I didn't," he said. "But I seen too many folks left behind. My wife, she died giving birth to our boy. He didn't make it either." Her breath hitched. He looked at her then, not in pity but in the shared understanding of someone who'd lived through the same ache. When I saw you on that platform, bleedin' and tryin' to find your baby, I reckon it wasn't you I saw. It was her. It was what I couldn't fix back then. The room filled with quiet, the only sound the faint rustle of the baby breathing. I don't expect you to trust me, he said finally. You can stay here until you can walk proper. There's food, warmth. After that, if you want to go, I won't stop you. She looked down at her hands, the coat he'd wrapped around her still draped across her shoulders. It was far too big, swallowing her frame, but it carried his warmth, his scent, a strange comfort that she couldn't name. Where would I go? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. The world already decided what I'm worth. Graves' voice was low but firm. Then let's make it wrong. Her lips trembled. No one had ever said such a thing to her before. Not her kin, not the men who'd used her, not the ones who'd watched her fall. The baby stirred again, a soft cry escaping his lips. She scooped him up, rocking him gently against her chest. Graves turned away to give her space, pretending to busy himself by checking the fire. Thank you, she said after a long silence. For everything. He nodded without turning. You don't owe me thanks. Just promise you'll eat when you can. And rest. She smiled faintly. I don't think I can do much else. He glanced over his shoulder then, the corner of his mouth twitching into something close to a smile. That's a start. As the morning wore on, the house filled with the soft rhythm of small sounds, the creak of the chair, the murmur of wind through the window, the sleepy sighs of the child. Graves stepped outside for a while, giving her time alone, but his shadow lingered just beyond the porch rail, watchful, steady. She sat by the window with Eli in her arms, watching the sunlight play across the hills. Every time the baby's breath touched her skin, she whispered his name again and again, as if repeating it might root her to this new life. She felt fragile still, but not broken. When the cowboy returned, she looked up, meeting his eyes through the open doorway. You said your boy didn't make it, she said softly. I'm sorry. He tipped his hat slightly. So was I, but maybe he sent me down that road for a reason. She looked down at her son, then back at the man who'd bought her freedom with his kindness. Maybe he did. Graves didn't reply. He just nodded, the faintest smile at the corner of his mouth, before turning to tend to the horses. The sun dipped low by evening, painting the sky in pink and gold. Lydia sat rocking Eli, her body still sore but her heart finally steady. When she laid him in the cradle that night, she whispered a quiet vow into the shadows of the room. To live, to be more than what they made me. Outside, Graves sat on the porch, the soft glow of lamplight spilling past the door. He heard her words, though she hadn't meant him to, and his gaze softened. For the first time in years, the ache in his chest eased, not gone, but gentler.